Welcome to Grace Fellowship Baptist Church Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, September 3rd, 2025. We are in the book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 13, and we will read to chapter 14, verse 1. In the 18th year of the reign of Jeroboam, Abijah became king of Judah, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 years. His mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Uriel of Gibeah. There was war between Abijah and Jeroboam. Abijah went into battle with a force of 400,000 able fighting men, and Jeroboam drew up a battle line against him with 800,000 able men. Let's pause there. There's actually two major issues to deal with here. The first one is, who is Abijah's mother? She's named Maacah. In chapter 13, it is said she is the daughter of Uriel of Gibeah. In chapter 11, she was identified as daughter of Absalom. In 1 Kings 15, which is the parallel passage, verse 1 and 2, she is daughter of Abijah, which is a variant pronunciation of Absalom. In the parallel passage to 2 Chronicles 11, she's identified as daughter of Absalom. So, whose daughter is she? Is she Absalom, the son of David's daughter? And remember, last week I told you, if so, she's at least in her 70s when he marries her. And she has 5 sons, I think it was. So that seems kind of far-fetched. It was not impossible for women to live that long, but you would think that every recording, both in Kings and in Chronicles, would point out she was miraculously old when she started having children. There are several ways to interpret that. This Absalom that was her father may not be the son of David. Absalom may have been a common name, particularly after David names his son Absalom. And the Hebrew for chapter 13 can be stated that Maacah was a daughter of Uriah of Gibeah, or a granddaughter of Uriah of Gibeah, which there's two ways to interpret that. If you say that Maacah was Uriah of Gibeah's granddaughter, then Absalom, her father, was son of Uriah of Gibeah, not of David. That ends the problem with how does she have 5 children when she's so old. It could also be that Uriah of Gibeah basically adopted Absalom's daughter, raised her, and therefore this is the daughter of the Absalom son of David, but Uriah raised her and therefore is her father, her adopted father. And it still leaves us with the problem of her age. And there is no good explanation. The people that wrote this should have known the problem and tried to deal with it, because they're 400 or so years later, and they're writing it fairly close together. I mean, it's not that far apart. It should have been really obvious to the authors that they had a discrepancy. They may have been looking at two different sources, saying two different things, but you would think they would want to harmonize it. They thought it wasn't worth mentioning. And they're people who the genealogy of who somebody was very important to them. I find that peculiar. My personal take on this is that Maacah is the daughter of Absalom, not the Absalom son of David. That Absalom is the son of Uriah of Gibeah, and she is therefore close to Abijah's age, and it makes sense that they would get married and have lots of children, and the writers knew that. They wanted to imply in chapter 13 that they knew that this was Maacah, the granddaughter of Uriah of Gibeah, and not granddaughter of David, and therefore resolve the age issue problem without having to explicitly deal with it. And they thought they had adequately done so, but either their understanding of Hebrew or ours, and since it became a dead language before the scholars got to it, it's probably our understanding. We've lost some nuance of meaning and can't translate it well. That's the most likely explanation that works in my mind. Different scholars have different theories. None of them I find very compelling except that one. Then we have the beginning of this battle. Abijah is going into battle with 400,000 fighting men. Jeroboam is going into battle with 800,000 men, and they're facing battle together. Abijah is overmatched. When you're doing hand-to-hand fighting and you're facing twice as many soldiers, you have a serious problem. You're very likely to lose, just because it doesn't matter if your men are better, if they have better tactics, home field advantage, have better defensive fortifications, etc., etc., etc. You're just going to get overwhelmed. And they have to kill, twice as many people just to stay even. And apparently this was the dynamic between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom had more people. The southern kingdom had fewer people. They did have more agricultural resources, but per person. So for the same land area, they actually had more people, denser populations. I want to point out something here before I go on. 1 Kings 15 has the equivalent passages, and it's basically verses 1 and 2 and 6 through 8. And it is very short. It basically condemns Abijah as not following God. He reigned 3 years. There was war continuously, and he dies, and his son Asa takes over. And there's no mention of this battle, just that he and Jeroboam fought the whole time. So what I'm fixing to read to you here until we get to verse 22 is all new to Scripture. It comes from the source that we'll read in verse 22, which is, it comes from the annotations of Iddo the seer. We heard about him last week with Rehoboam, that he was a source that Rehoboam's information came from. Apparently, 1 Kings did not think his Abijah's age was important. Neither does the chroniclers. They may not have known his age. He was not Rehoboam's oldest son. Apparently, he's the oldest living son. He is the oldest son of Rehoboam's favorite wife. He put the other sons out, and Shishak, the king of Egypt, killed them all, apparently. That's the implication. And so Abijah becomes the one that Rehoboam wants to be king. In 3 years, he didn't have a lot of time to make it happen. Now, Rehoboam reigned 17 years. So Abijah had to be born before Rehoboam got on the throne. So Rehoboam probably did at least some parenting of him. And therefore, Abijah probably knew his grandfather, Solomon. But he knew Solomon as the old man that worshipped all kinds of other gods. But we'll learn Abijah is not as evil as Rehoboam or King Solomon in his later years, because what records here. And I think, well, I'll interpret it after I read it. Sorry. So we have this battle being drawn up. The northern kingdom has twice as many soldiers, Israel, as Judah, the southern kingdom, has. Verse 4. Abijah stood on Mount Zemaraim in the hill country of Ephraim and said, Jeroboam and all Israel, listen to me. Don't you know that the Lord, the God of Israel, has given the kingdom of Israel to David and his descendants forever by covenant of salt? Yet Jeroboam, son of Nebat, an official of Solomon, son of David, rebelled against his master. Some worthless scoundrels gathered around him and opposed Rehoboam, son of Solomon, when he was young and indecisive and not strong enough to resist them. Okay, let's pause here. This is a political speech. Rehoboam, well, it's full of half-truths. Abijah is making this speech, but Rehoboam was not young. He was 41. He should have known better. He was 41 in a society where 45 was the average life expectancy. He was a young side of old, or a old side of middle age when he became king. He should have been wise. He should have understood how things were going. He should have known Jeroboam. He should have understood how to interpret his father's advisors and what they said and take some advice from them, but he did not. He was just foolish. He was not young and foolish. He was just foolish. Now, Jeroboam, son of Nebat, did have some bad advisors also, some worthless scoundrels. So he's being insulting to the king he's going to be fighting. And they did rebel against Rehoboam. Now, the thing is, God had not made a covenant that the kingdom would be David's descendants forever with a covenant of salt. That's a flat out lie. He gave David a conditional promise that if his sons and grandsons, etc., after him continually worshiped God and were a man after God's own heart the way David was, then they would reign forever. He gave Solomon the same conditional promise. If you obey me the way David did, unconditionally, and were a man after my own heart your entire reign, your lineage will be forever. And Solomon turned away. God told him twice, and Solomon still turned away. So God snatched it away from Rehoboam, and he told prophets that, and the prophets told Jeroboam. And they told Jeroboam the same conditional promise. If you obey me the way David did, then I will make you king over these 10 tribes forever. But Jeroboam was even worse than Solomon. And he broke the covenant immediately by making false idols and calling them Yahweh, and running out the Levites and the priest and anybody who was interested in worshiping Yahweh correctly. So Jeroboam lost it from the very beginning. If Abijah had told the truth, it would have been damning enough. But he did not. And he told political spin. Now, Rehoboam was probably indecisive and not strong enough to resist Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who was a well-organized man. And Rehoboam was probably not a well-organized man. He was used to his dad being well-organized and running things, and he was used to being a prince and having a bunch of wives and being a rich man's son. Let's pick up in verse 8. And now you plan to resist the kingdom of the Lord, which is in the hands of David's descendants. You are indeed a vast army and have with you the golden calves that Jeroboam made to be your gods. But didn't you drive out the priests of the Lord, the sons of Aaron, and the Levites, and make priests of your own as as the people of other lands do? Whoever comes to consecrate himself with a young bull and 7 rams may become a priest of what are not gods. Now he's finally getting to some truth. Did you run out all the priests of the real Yahweh and you set up these false gods, and your priests are just anybody who has, is willing to sacrifice 8 animals and go on? Verse 10, as for us, the Lord is our God, and we have not forsaken him. The priests who serve the Lord are sons of Aaron, and the Levites assist them. Every morning and evening they present burnt offerings and fragrant incense to the Lord. They set out the bread of the ceremony on the ceremonially clean table and light the lamps on the gold lampstands every evening. We are observing the requirements of the Lord our God, but you have forsaken him. God is with us. He is our leader. His priests with their trumpets will sound the battle cry against you. Men of Israel, do not fight against the Lord, the God of your fathers, for you will not succeed. So he's doing psychological warfare. He's trying to portray that he worships Yahweh correctly because they do the ritual. He doesn't understand the real way you worship Yahweh. His mind and heart are not with Yahweh. On the other hand, he's pointing out that Jeroboam actively rebels against Yahweh instead of trying to follow the form. And so he misunderstands the correct way to worship. He points out, though, that they follow the ritual the way Moses said to do it, and are therefore worshiping Yahweh correctly. He doesn't understand what correctly is, but he's pointing out to them they're in rebellion to Yahweh. And the chroniclers want to point out that because he was, in some sense, putting his faith in Yahweh, and that they followed the ritual correctly, God was going to bless this battle. And Abijah is trying to use this political speech to dishearten his enemy soldiers so that he has a chance, and hearten his own so that they have a faith that they can do the job. Verse 13. Now Jeroboam had sent troops around to the rear so that while he was in front of Judah, the ambush was behind them. Judah turned and saw that they were being attacked at both front and rear. Then they cried out to the Lord. The priests blew their trumpets, and the men of Judah raised a battle cry. At the sound of their battle cry, God routed Jeroboam and all Israel before Abijah and Judah. The Israelites fled before Judah, and God delivered them into their hands. Abijah and his men inflicted heavy losses on them, so there were 500,000 casualties among Israel's able men. The men of Israel were subdued on that occasion, and the men of Judah were victorious because they relied on the Lord, the God of their fathers. Abijah pursued Jeroboam and took from him the towns of Bethel, Jeshaniah, and Ephraim with their surrounding villages. Jeroboam did not regain power during the time of Abijah, and the Lord struck him down and he died. But Abijah grew in strength. He married 14 wives and had 22 sons and 16 daughters. So this was a decisive battle because Abijah claimed God's, to be worshiping God. God also did not want the southern kingdom destroyed. And because they put on a public face and the priests did their job, and apparently the priests were truly worshiping Yahweh in spirit and truth, they hadn't turned away. Let's face it, this is 20 years since Solomon died. It's less than, 30 years since the temple was built. Well, no, it's been about 45 years since the temple was built, excuse me. People would still be alive that knew what it was like before it's built. So people are still worshiping Yahweh. The royal family may not be worshiping Yahweh correctly. And the people who wrote Kings knew that and just called him a bad king because he didn't worship Yahweh correctly. He was evil. But he invoked Yahweh's name here, and Yahweh's reputation would have been hurt if Yahweh did not help Judah win. It would also greatly weaken Judah, who, let's face it, has had the king of Egypt destroy them in this past generation. And they've been continually at war with Jeroboam, the entire reign of Jeroboam. So, if he's going to save Judah, he has to do it through this man. And so he lets him win this battle and causes them to win the battle. And 400,000 men of Judah killed 500,000 men of an 800,000 man army in a day. And Abijah conquers some of Israel, adds those cities to Judah, and Jeroboam, son of Nebat, does not invade again. Now, this battle did not happen in Judah. The men of Judah did not have home field advantage. They were in Ephraim. That is the northern kingdom. And they got surrounded there. And for one thing, that meant Absalom's troops were spread out, so they were not well defended. The troops of Judah could lock up in battle array where they could defend themselves better. So there is some reasonable explanation for why they were more able to fight the battle. But it's probably not enough to explain this lopsided of a battle. And the chroniclers, knowing that and knowing it saved the kingdom, attribute it to God. I'm with that. I think God was preserving Judah. And they simply say that Jeroboam did not regain power and he died. The Lord struck him down and he died. They're pointing out that he's in rebellion to God and he does not succeed, and God kills him. They don't deal with the northern kingdom. It's out of the covenant. It's an open rebellion to God. And so the only things we get about those kings is when they interact with the kings of Judah. verse 22. The other events of Abijah's reign, what he did and what he said, are written in the annotations of the prophet Iddo. And Abijah rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. Asa his son succeeded him as king, and in his days the country was at peace for 10 years. So we know from this that because of this battle, Asa had peace for 10 years. Abijah dies and is no longer the bad king of Judah. Asa, his son, becomes king and reigns, and for the first 10 years has peace. We'll get to Asa next week. There's lots to talk about him. Abijah was not a good king. The writers of Chronicles, the writers of Chronicles, they kind of gloss over that he was not a good king. The writers of Kings flatly say it. They're probably writing while Asa is king, and they can see that Abijah was not a good king. And God condemned him. He only reigned 3 years, and he was dead. But he does this one thing, and people trust Yahweh, and Yahweh saves them. And so he at least publicly puts on the right face. And God takes him out before how evil he is could become part of his legacy. Holy Father, I ask that we worship you in spirit and in truth, the way David did, and that when we sin, we will humble ourselves before you and admit it like David did. That we will not be like Solomon and continually turn away. That we will not be like Rehoboam, wishy-washy and following bad advice. That we won't be like Abijah, just putting on a public front, but honestly worshiping you. Lord, have us to worship you with a whole heart, trusting you completely, obeying you, living the way you want us to, proclaiming your word correctly, that you will come to rescue us, not because we put on a public political speech that puts you in a tight spot, but because you love us and care for us, and you will protect us because you love us, because we obey you and we do what's right. In your holy name, amen. I'm your host, Frank Reich, Associate Pastor of Family Ministry at Grace Fellowship Baptist Church, and this has been the Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, September 3rd, 2025. It was recorded on Saturday, August 30th, 2025. And it rained this morning. Praise God. And my house, we got about an inch. And then after it quit raining, I got out and got walking. Did slightly over 5 miles. And finished walking the neighborhood that I've been trying to walk since June. And that's good. It is an area I've never walked before. It was very dirty. the neighbors are not used to people picking up litter. Several people have commented. Had a decently long conversation with a woman today about that. And she was very kind. She wanted to bless me for that. She offered several things to bless me, and then, I would turn them down because I'm not. She had some misconceptions about what's going on. And then when she figured out that I'm just, she intentionally asked God to bless me. And I appreciated that. I in turn blessed her, thanked her. She thanked me. She complimented me and Penny. It was a fun experience. I could tell her heart was in the right spot, even if she didn't understand. I hope to see you tomorrow morning at worship and Sunday school. I hope to see you tomorrow evening at Dale's class. And I hope to see you Wednesday evening at church, where we can discuss Abijah and how his reign went, and understand how we should be. Have a blessed week.